Thanks. Good afternoon, and thank you for the organizers. Actually, the organizers gave me 3 key words to prepare my talk. One is security, the other one is migration, and the third one is Europe. Oof. Human security. Whose security are we talking about? Are we talking about the security of the migrants, the security of the countries, of the communities in the countries of destination, or are we talking about border security, migration? Who's a migrant? Who of you is not a migrant? And Europe, what's the future of Europe after this and this ongoing difficult migration crisis that is probably more a system crisis and more a crisis of values? In a nutshell, the content of what I'm going to present to you, and the ones who need to can take a nap after 30 seconds, it's one, I'm going to be focusing on the Euro-Mediterranean region. Though a lot what I'm going to be saying is also valid for other regions in the world, and probably also for your country. I'm going to be focusing on children because in the migration flows, children are amongst the most vulnerable group. Also because I work for a child rights organization, this one here, good luck, Terres des Hommes, TDH in English. It's a child rights organization working in 68 countries, and I have the privilege of leading the organization as the global CEO. It also runs this campaign called Destination Unknown, which is a campaign on the protection of children on the move. 3 images that have gone through the media for quite a number of months with this European crisis. One is the image of this flow of people, hundreds in their thousands, through land, through water, moving in Europe, moving into Europe, coming from Africa, from the Middle East, from Asia. They have been welcomed in some communities. They had been treated with violence in others. The image of this little boy, his body was swept on the beach of a Turkish coast. Aylan is his name, and he was wearing a red t-shirt and blue shorts that would stop above the knee. A child like many that we have seen. A child that fled from his country where he wasn't wanted and died at the doors of Europe. Many before him have lived something like this, and unfortunately since then many more have come. 500 children died in 2015 crossing the Mediterranean as migrant children. These images have really shocked the consciousness of many, but for how long? And then all the stories and the images of extraordinary devotion, extraordinary humanity of migrants, of host communities to welcome migrants arriving in Europe. But also the other side of the coin, the us and them mentality, the rejection of migrants arriving in Europe, the building blocks of migration policy, which is built on fear, on barbed wires, on walls, on fences, on stereotypes, on us and them. And these are not the only choices that have to be made. There are other long-lasting solutions on which migration policy has to be built, and built on 2 pillars, on values and on evidence. Values. I get a sense of hope when, of course, I look at the legal framework on which that we have, on agendas, on declarations that put in the center of it the universality of human rights. And migrants' rights are human rights. And evidence. Evidence, these are facts, data, views and opinions, the reality of what is really happening, not what some of our politicians are telling us. Europe. Europe is very diverse. It's a continent. 50 countries, 740 million inhabitants. The European Union is a union, a political and economic union with 28 member states, 500 million inhabitants. 1 million people arrived in 2015 from outside Europe into Europe as migrants or refugees. This is 0.2% of the total population of the European Union. Of them, 1/3 are children. 1/3 are covered by the Child Rights Convention. 1/3 are under 18. The Syrian crisis has displaced over 4 million people up to now. And though we should have a special attention to this dramatic crisis which is going on, it should not overshadow many other crises which are going on elsewhere in the world. In total, last year, about 60 million people were displaced, either as refugees, asylum seekers, or displaced internally in different parts of the world. 50%, 1 in 2, was a child. 1 in 2 was a child. And when we look where are these people being hosted, well, over 80% are being hosted in developing countries. So countries that have less resources to be able to host these people that are coming in. And this is when we talk about the burden sharing, though the word burden, I don't like it too much. But if we go back to the Euro-Mediterranean region and we look at this, you see this small country down there, Lebanon, in the Middle East. Lebanon is hosting 2 million refugees. This is 1/3 of its population. If we translate this on the map, this small country, to have the size over there close to Western Europe, that we are more familiar with the geography, that's the size it has. So 2 million people, refugees, hosted in that country. While, for instance, in Britain, they're squabbling around the fact of hosting another 20,000 asylum seekers by 2020. But despite that, there are communities that are saying, no, we want to welcome and we want to share resources and we want to work in the integration of some of these migrants and refugees. 160,000 is the number of asylum seekers that the member states, so the 28 member states of the European Union, decided to reallocate throughout Europe. 160,000. Let's not forget the 2 million in Lebanon, 160,000. This was a decision in September, a difficult decision. And there have been now, this week, the European leaders have met, and there's all this difficulty of applying this decision. Up to now, 500 of these people have been reallocated in the different countries. So there is really a major difficulty in going into the implementation and to go further, and for the member states to show some strong political will. If we keep on talking about this burden sharing, I have to talk to you about the Dublin regulations. The Dublin regulations is an EU policy that was implemented, that was put in place in 1997. So this is long before a crisis as we know it now of many migrants coming to Europe. And the Dublin regulations say that when a refugee has to ask asylum in the first country of entry where he arrives in the European Union. So, and he would supposedly leave his fingerprints in that country, and then the process for the asylum seeking would start. But what happens then is that the first-line countries like Greece or Italy receive a huge amount of people, and this shows that there is an urgent need to reshape the Dublin regulations because countries and migrants are no longer accepting these rules. One of the major groups that are at risk are children. Yeah, I gave you the figures. 1/3 of the 1 million who entered into Europe are under 18. And they are at risk for many reasons. Of course, when they travel for sickness, because of the danger of accidents, but also for abuse, neglect, trafficking, child labor. And there is one specific group, it's not the only one, of course, that has to have concerns, but there's an increasing number of children that are traveling without a guardian, without their parents. And from a very young age, I have seen children at the age of 10 and 11 crossing the Mediterranean alone, mainly children coming from Egypt that I have met in Sicily. I don't know if some of you saw, it hit the media, 10,000 refugee children are missing after arriving to Europe. This was a Europol report that came out just two weeks ago. Nothing new. I mean, this has been reported by many organizations before, including the organization I work for. But the important thing is to understand what exactly does this mean that children are disappearing. The figure doesn't matter because these become invisible children. There are children that decide to get out of the protection system and become invisible. So it's difficult to measure what is invisible, of course. So that's all the difficulty with figures. To give you an example, a Gambian child that I have met in Sicily, already on several occasions. When I met him the first time, he'd been already in Sicily for 2 months, and he told me his story. He had fled from Gambia because of violence. He had crossed West Africa, crossed the Sahara, where he lost one of his friends who was traveling with him. Got to Libya, was mugged, so lost the little bit of money he had to work to earn money to pay the smugglers. It's 1,000 euros to be put in a dinghy to cross the Mediterranean. Was saved by the Italian Navy. Told me also that he had been in detention in Tripoli in Libya, and then was put in a shelter in Sicily. And after telling this horrific story, which of course I haven't done justice to what he has lived, he told me, but the worst I'm living is now in this shelter. And I said, why? He said, well, I don't want to live on charity. I want to be an active citizen. I have dreams. I have studied in Gambia, and I have come here to Europe because I couldn't live over there, and I have something to offer. And here I am stuck in limbo, in the administrative limbo, and there's no, I'm little by little, I'm losing hope of being able to go on to my dreams. Sooner or later, this boy may disappear and go underground because the system is not adapted to take care of his needs. Another example, and that was fairly recently, in a shelter in Thessaloniki in Greece, which is run by one of the Destination Unknown member organizations called ARSIS. This is a well-functioning center that really is open but offers protection to the children. A group of Afghan boys. Generally, there are boys that come from Afghanistan, and they often travel in groups, but they're all minors, they're all children. And they explained how positive they thought about the shelter and the way they were living in the shelter. But at the same time, they said, we don't trust the system. We don't trust the system, and we have plans. We want to go for family reunification to Sweden or to Germany. And the only way they're going to be able to do it is to disappear, to become invisible, and to be out of the protection system that is offered. The protection system is not working for all these children in Europe. What is a refugee and what is a migrant? Well, refugees are people who are fleeing persecution. An economic migrant or economic migrants seem to be referred to all the others. But many people are fleeing destitution, poverty, starvation. And we have the moral responsibility to comply with the legal responsibility which is enshrined in the 1951 Convention that says you do not send back someone who is coming for haven, for asylum, for sanctuary. These people, they're coming as people. And there are not many alternatives. We can leave them at the doors of Europe, behind our walls and our barbed wires. Leave them freezing in the Balkans. Leave them on the beaches in Turkey. We can send them back to what they are fleeing, or we can welcome them. And there's only one moral answer to comply with our legal responsibility. Is Europe going to redefine its borders and have border controls? There are more and more border controls within the European Union. Are the member states going to abandon this extraordinary progress which was made with the Schengen regulations, which gave freedom of movement within the European Union? The member organizations are squabbling around the solutions to be found. And though there is no quick fix, there are not either many solutions. Welcoming is one of them. Welcoming has to be in the center of the solutions. And the protection of migrants is not the only issue, because through the protection of migrants, you have to look at the protection and the rights of the other communities, of the country of destination, of transit, and of origin. Migration in itself is not a protection problem, is not the protection problem. Migration is not a security problem. The problem is irregular, exploited channel routes. The problem is the exclusion of people from legal and accessible migration. The need to have a system which offers accessible legal migration is one of the key elements of the human security framework. And we hear in Europe a lot of this manipulation by short-sighted politicians around migration who work on stereotypes. They don't work on evidence. They don't refer to the values of the Constitution or of the legal framework. And we have a populist anti-immigration which is increasing in some of the countries. And we have to take this very seriously. We have to look at how to counter this by bringing evidence. And no, migration doesn't increase insecurity. No, migration doesn't create a decrease of local wages. Yes, migration gives positive impact to the economy of a receiving country. And yes, the remittances that the migrants send back to their home are sometimes life-saving for the families of the countries of origin and are an important contribution to development. States, of course, have an important role to play in reframing a global migration system. Not only for Europe, it's global that it has to be looked at. And the positive is that there are non-state actors that are coming out and are playing a role in the brokerage of this protection system. Non-state actors like the business world. And all right, they do see migrants as consumers, as clients, and therefore they need to be protected. Of course, as civil society and citizens, and of course also the local governments. Dear audience, we have choices to make as a society. We are at a tipping point. We can build bridges, or we can build fences, prisons, barbed wires, walls. The common understanding, or the understanding of our common humanity, can guide us in making the right choices. And at the moment, there is of course a huge concern. Are we making the right choices? Are we tipping in the right direction? Thank you.